I now give the floor to His Excellency Bruno Eduardo Rodríguez Parrilla, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cuba.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, delegates, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare, like never before, the true essence of the unjust and unsustainable prevailing international order. Never has humankind had this wealth of scientific and technical potential that it has now. Neither has it ever had the extraordinary capacity that it does now to create wealth and well-being. And however, never before has the world been so unequal in terms of just how much people suffer. 828 million people, 10% of the world population, are going hungry, and around 50 million children suffer from stunting, the most deadly form of malnutrition. Unemployment will affect 207 million persons in 2022, 21 million more than in 2019. In the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, 773 million human beings do not know how to read or write. Around 6.5 million people have died as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccinations to tackle this crisis are inaccessible to billions of people in low-income countries. In 2021, pharmaceutical multinationals earned some $850 billion. External debt has been paid several times over, and nevertheless it is growing. Paradoxically, military expenditure at a global level is growing at a dizzying pace, and for the first time now exceeds $2 trillion. Nothing justifies the fact that humankind continues to remain threatened by the existence of around 13,000 nuclear weapons. We champion the universalization of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. How much more could we maybe do if these resources were devoted to promoting health and development? How many deaths as a result of COVID and other diseases might have been avoided? How many boys and girls would be spared hunger and preventable illnesses? Mr. President, greenhouse gases reached record levels in 2021, and the same will occur this year. The average sea level has reached a new high. The last 7 years are the warmest ever recorded in history. We cannot continue to fail to heed the alarm bells that are sounding to alert us to an imminent climate disaster. We have one planet Earth, one common home. For the rich and the poor, we must act without delay. The philosophy of war and plundering and the unreasonable patterns of production and consumption spawned by capitalism, decried by President Fidel Castro, will lead us to the apocalypse. International relations are moving along a dangerous path. The U.S. offensive, aimed at bending states to their will through threats and economic coercion, as well as military, political and diplomatic coercion, efforts to subject them to an order based on their whimsical rules, together with the expansion of NATO and the development of a doctrine of aggression, hand in hand with the non-conventional war that's underway will inevitably lead to a climate of tension and conflict whose consequences are unpredictable. Mr. President, Cuba, as a small island developing state, has paid a high price for defending its legitimate right to exist as a sovereign and independent nation. For more than 6 decades now, we have resisted a ruthless and unilateral economic, commercial, and financial blockade, which was ratcheted up to extreme, unprecedented levels from 2019, and this continued during the pandemic. 30 years have now elapsed since the first General Assembly resolution against this blockade, and at this time the US continues to ignore the almost unanimous demand from you to cease its illegal and brutal policy against Cuba. Endeavors are still waged on the part of the US to create material shortages, to sow despair, disenchantment, and to cause damage to the Cuban people. The government of the United States is strengthening pressure on banking institutions, companies, and governments throughout the world that are interested in establishing relations with Cuba, and the United States continues to obsessively pursue all sources of foreign exchange coming into the country to bring about the economic collapse of the nation. As a result, the Cuban economy has withstood extraordinary pressure that are having an impact on industry, service provision, are leading to a scarcity in food and medicines, and are leading to a decline in consumption and a decline in the general well-being of our people. The human damage caused by this policy and felt by all Cuban families is impossible to quantify, but is nevertheless vast, cruel, and immoral. The blockade is an act of economic war in times of peace. The current government of the United States keeps in force the most aggressive measures of pressure on our country. These were adopted by the government of Donald Trump and remain in force. This administration continues the unfair inclusion of Cuba on the arbitrary list produced by the State Department of countries that supposedly sponsor terrorism. This slanderous classification of our country as a sponsor of terrorism stigmatizes our financial bodies and institutions and makes it extremely difficult for us to conduct transactions or to pay payments or access credit. Cuba has been a victim of state terrorism and does not promote, nor will it ever promote, terrorism. On the contrary, we condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. The government of the United States manipulates opportunistically highly delicate issues such as terrorism, religion, democracy, justice, corruption, and human rights. The double standards, the inconsistency, the selectivity, the manipulation, the political manipulation indeed, of which the United States are guilty, damage the cause of human rights. Some delegates have not dared to mention the sad blockade visited upon Cuba, and that is sad. I urge the government of the United States to solve the issues which fuel irregular migration and which promote the loss of life. These factors include their failure since 2017 to uphold their obligation, according to bilateral agreements in force, to earmark no less than some 20,000 annual visas to migrants. There is the Cuban Adjustment Law, there is the treaties that are politically motivated. There are restrictions placed on regular transit countries and the ratcheted up economic blockade. These cause migration and must be ceased. We've heard today that the processing of migrant visas will return to the Embassy of the United States in Havana, and that is a positive step. Cuba reiterates its readiness to move towards a better understanding and better relations with the government of the United States and to develop civilized relations, and including relationships of cooperation between both countries, and this on the basis of mutual respect, sovereign equality, and on the understanding that no attempts will be made to undermine our sovereignty and independence in spite of our major differences. We underscore the valuable commitment and the shown by Cubans and their descendants in protests that have occurred in that country and across the world to ensure that Cuba's sovereign rights are respected and to reject the merciless actions of the United States, in particular the policy of the economic blockade. I also wish to deeply thank heads of state and government for their statements in this general debate, and I thank them for their historic support as well as that of the General Assembly. And I'm also thankful for the demonstrations of solidarity towards Cuba by governments, key figures, political organizations, solidarity movements, social and people's movements from across the world. Today, this solidarity and support remains absolutely vital. Mr. President, despite the colossal challenges faced, the Cuban people and government have not let up in their attempts to forge ahead with the construction of a socialist society which is fairer, democratic, prosperous, and sustainable. We conquered COVID-19 with resources, our own vaccines, and the solidity of our public health system and our system of science. We were able to humbly contribute by sending 58 medical brigades around the world. At the worst moments of the pandemic, we sent those to some 48 countries. We work to recover the economic and social life of our country. We work to support the transformation of our communities and to sustain and extend social programs in the country. We continue to hone our legal order, our state and the legal order, that is, of our socialist state of social justice to guarantee the full and proper enjoyment of all human rights by all Cuban people. And we do this to ultimately enrich the system of social justice which several generations have enjoyed. On the 25th of September, after a broad participatory process of popular consultation, we will hold the legislative referendum on an innovative family code. This vote will be a genuine exercise of direct democracy and of the effective power of the Cuban people. Mr. President, unity in diversity, as proposed by then-President Raúl Castro, is possible in countries of the South, and the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, which is growing increasingly stronger and is creating conditions so that our region can develop higher, better forms of cooperation on the basis of the very precepts of the Declaration of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We are grateful for the dignified stance adopted by several countries in the region on the fact that we've been arbitrarily excluded from various diplomatic fora in our hemisphere. We express our solidarity with the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and with its constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the civic military union of its people as it attempts to withstand attempts made to subvert and destabilize the internal order of that brotherly country. We reject the implementation of unilateral coercive measures in and against Venezuela. We denounce the imperialist attempts made to destabilize the government of reconciliation and national unity of Nicaragua. We reiterate our staunch support for the brotherly Nicaraguan people and for their president, Daniel Ortega. We stand in full solidarity with the sisterly nations of the Caribbean, and we support their legitimate claims for reparations for the damaging effects of colonialism and slavery. These peoples need and deserve to receive just, special, and differentiated treatment. We once again reaffirm our historic commitment to the self-determination and independence of the people of Puerto Rico. Haiti needs a special contribution to be made by the international community to its reconstruction and development. Humankind has a debt to settle with that republic. We support the legitimate claim of President Alberto Fernandez and of the sovereign people of the Argentinian Republic over the Malvinas Islands, the South Sandwich Islands, and South Georgia Islands, and the surrounding maritime areas. We express our full solidarity with the Vice President of Argentina, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who was the victim of an unjust and unfounded legal and media attack, and then recently suffered an attempt on her life. We reiterate our staunch commitment to peace in Colombia. The clear preparedness and readiness for peace of Colombia's current president and relevant stakeholders mean that the region and the international community must extend their support to the nation. The necessary resources must be provided to support the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. That agenda establishes the roadmap for the development of that brotherly continent. We are lobbying for the search for a peaceful and negotiated solution to the situation imposed upon Syria, and we call for a cessation in foreign interference and for the full respect of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We support a just, broad, and lasting solution to the conflict in the Middle East. This must be a solution which guarantees the genuine exercise of the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to build their own state within pre-1967 borders, with their capital in East Jerusalem. And we call for the end of the Israeli occupation of the occupied Palestinian and Arab territories. We reaffirm our unwavering solidarity with the Sahrawi people. We reject the unilateral coercive measures imposed on the Islamic Republic of Iran. We condemn the imposition of unjust unilateral economic measures on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and we condemn foreign interference in their domestic affairs. We oppose interference in the internal affairs of the Republic of Belarus. We reaffirm our repudiation of the imposition of unilateral sanctions against the Russian Federation. We condemn the unfounded smear campaigns waged against the People's Republic of China and attempts to undermine their territorial integrity and sovereignty. We reiterate the unwavering support for the One China policy. We champion a serious diplomatic and constructive and realistic solution to the current war in Ukraine. This solution must be found through peaceful means with full respect for international law. The solution must guarantee the security and sovereignty of all. Mr. President, Cuba will continue to speak out loud and clear to reject hegemonism and domination, unilateral coercive measures, genocidal blockades, and attempts to impose one culture and one model on the world. We will never let up in the defense of the independence, sovereignty, and self-determination of peoples without any interference or intervention from foreign powers. We have a glorious past, and we must protect present and future generations of Cubans with the leadership of President Miguel Díaz-Canel. We will creatively resist, and we will tirelessly struggle until we achieve our dreams of peace and development with equity and social justice for Cuba and for the world. Many thanks indeed.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cuba.